Hello, everyone, and welcome. You are tuning into the first of a series of special editions that we're going to be doing. We're calling them our Solstice series. I'm going to be featuring several different astrologers who are also our inner circle guides, who are also going to be on a panel, a special panel that we're going to be doing for the summer solstice, because this is not just summer solstice, because I know for some of you it's not the summer. But this is a really big astrological and astronomical event. And so we wanted to bring some of our guides together to discuss the solstice and what it means for now and for the rest of 2020. So if you want to sign up for that event, it's free. It's happening June 17th, or is it June 18th, Brett?
I think it's the 17th.
Okay, June 17th.
We're both like this right now. There's so
Yeah,
many things.
exactly. June 17th. No, it is June 17th. It's free. You can go to astrologyhub.com/solstice and sign up for it. So Brett, Gemini Brett, is here. He is going to be one of our panelists for that event. And he's here today. We're going to be talking about several different things. We're talking about astrology and astronomy. I know most of you know the difference between those things, but he's going to explain that to us in his own words. But then also why someone studying astrology would really benefit from also studying astronomy. And then we're going to talk about astrolocation, which is a really fascinating field or branch within astrology that talks about your energy in different places on the planet and how your energy either syncs with, or you've everyone's been to one of those places where you're like, ooh, I just don't like that place, I don't like the vibe, or oh my gosh, yes, I feel so good here. So why is that, and how you can actually see that in the astrology chart. So we're going to be talking about all that today, and of course all about the summer solstice as well. So welcome everybody, thank you for being here, and Gemini Brett, welcome, and thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Aloha. You said
Aloha.
summer solstice again.
It's like in my
I hear you.
vocabulary. I know, it just like
Well,
goes.
astrology is so often taught seasonally, right? That we're really encouraged to. So a few things that I'll say June solstice, or
June's
I'll
good.
say Cancer solstice, which of course then is implying the tropical zodiac. But astronomically speaking, the best word for it would be the North solstice.
Okay.
Because what that point is, like, let's get some models out here. Earth, all right, and this is the sun, and the Earth is orbiting the sun, and the pole is always pointing in the same direction, right? I mean, the pole literally defines. I like to call it Gaia's spine, Earth's rotational axis, and it defines north and south. I'm not talking about the magnetic thing like that migrates. This is real north, true south, right? And so what happens at June solstice is the northern tip of Gaia's spine is leaning towards the sun. And that's why we have more light in the summer, or in the northern hemisphere, summer solstice, and most shadow in the southern hemisphere, winter solstice, right? But it literally is because the northern point is leaning towards the light. So north solstice is a much better way to describe that. The tropical zodiac is a directional phenomenon, and the directions are defined by Earth's pole. This is really wonderful. I'll read this to you. So, you guys, have you had sidereal astrologers on as guides for Inner Circle?
Well, Vic Dakara would be the closest, but
Well,
I
he's
know
like a tropical Vedic astrologer. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
it just gets so confusing to bring in multiple zodiacs. But most listeners here who are following astrology will know that there's really three, because you mentioned astronomy, right? There's very much like kind of three primary zodiacal philosophies in our day and age. So one is constellations, right? And that's, I think, what like young astrologers believe the zodiac is, right? That the whole idea about Leo is that lion up there in the sky. But the constellations vary significantly in size. So you can, and this is one of the astronomers, like the modern day astronomers' principal claims against astrology, is that they'll say we're using the wrong zodiac because their zodiac is these constellations, and they vary in size significantly. Like the constellation I'll call Priestess to differentiate from the sign of Virgo is like 47 degrees. That's like a sign and a half in a little bit, you know? So the sidereal zodiac, sidereal means of the stars, and it's configured to a star, right? And then what they do from there is they take the circle of 360 and they just say 12 signs of 30. So even though the constellations don't divide the circle we call the ecliptic into equal slices, the sidereal zodiac says, yes, we do. And I'll say why, because creation creates in 12s. The tropical zodiac does the same thing, but it does it starting here at the directions, right? So it's not about a star, because in fact, over a long period of time, and this is one of the reasons why this solstice is so important, over a long period of time, this thing sweeps through the sky. It's like 26,000 years, called the third motion of Earth. But the tropical zodiac isn't about what stars it's aligned to, it's about our star, the sun. So the Earth-Sun relationship. And it really is the Gaia's spine. I call it the sword of our stone. The world tree would be an older term. And let me read a fantastic thing from the oldest scripture known, which is the Rig Veda. We hear, first, the 12-spoked wheel of order rolls around and around the sky and never ages. 720 suns in pairs rest on it. And so most will say this is a zodiacal statement, and that those 720 pairs are, in the Vedic practice, it's like every degree has two halves. But I wonder if they're speaking actually about two circles, because there's this other line in the same passage that goes, two birds, friends joined together, clutch the same tree. One of them eats the sweet fruit, the other looks on without eating. And for me, like, the one that eats the fruit is the one that's like married to this world tree. And that's the tropical zodiac. And we can look over time at how, what's amazing about this so-called third motion, this precessional motion, is that the 12-spoked wheel of the tropical zodiac and the 12-spoked wheel of the sidereal zodiac are slowly like changing in their relationship to one another. Kind of like 12 tooth gears, you know? And as they change, and the way, or I could say the way these two birds face one another, that brings us through the so-called astrological ages, like the dawning of the age of Aquarius, etc.
So are you saying that at this solstice is one of those major gear changes, so to speak?
Well, it's not in the regard to, most people are looking at the east point. See, the cool thing is, and let me say one more thing about this idea of north solstice, okay? If you're the sun and you are a shining light, and you're looking at this earth, okay? This is what June solstice looks like, because that pole, the northern pole, is leaning right towards you. And what happens is you're looking here. Okay, if it was equinox time, you're looking here at the equator. If it's December solstice, or I'll call south solstice, because now the southern tip is leaning towards you, you're looking here. And what happens is when the sun ingresses tropical Capricorn, it shines directly overhead the Tropic of Capricorn. At equinox time, it's shining above the equator. When the sun ingresses tropical Cancer, it's shining directly overhead the Tropic of Cancer. Right? So during the course of the year, the sun is kind of just moving up and down in the globe in this perspective, like between the tropics. Tropic in Greek, tropikos means turnarounds. So solstice means the sun stops. So what's happening every year, like forever, is that the sun is moving between the tropics of Earth, and it goes north for 6 months, and then it's at north solstice, turn around, and then it goes down for 6 months and turn around, right? It's like that. So the north solstice is a really, if you can like embody that. The tricky thing then is like, well, we usually learn that the energy of the north is like cold and wintry, because that's where in the northern hemisphere the sun is, the midnight sun is in that direction, right? So this is always a thing we have to come to terms with when we're studying the sacred science and the amazing endless dynamics of earth and sky, is that it goes both ways, and in many ways, and there's many ways to pet the cosmic cat.
So, Brett, you recently received a very high honor. You won an award at OPA, which is the Organization of Professional Astrologers, correct? For your outstanding contribution to the field of astrology. And a lot of that is around what you've been able to bring in terms of astronomy. So, bringing astronomy and astrology together. And why, first of all, why are you so passionate about that? And
Mhm.
then why do you feel it's so important for students to actually engage in understanding both?
Um, let's see. Can I share an image? I'm not set up to share my screen right now. So the
Yes.
angel in the background, can you set me up so I can share a picture? Because pictures tell 1,000 words.
The angel, Jamie, that would be you.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing honor, of course, to some others. I'm sorry, I'm just reading something that happened here. Okay, anyway,
You're,
let's
you're a
let's.
co-host. There you go.
Do you see that pretty picture?
Yes.
Took this from the house the other day. Um, Actually made a whole time lapse, which was wonderful. And we're looking at, so first of all, let's just gaze at this amazing image. And I'll say one thing it reveals is that the sky has chakras. Or maybe we could say that they're Earth's chakras. And if we play that game, then I can just describe these lights that you're looking at. Of course, this is the moon. It's a waning crescent moon. In the sacral zone, the orange zone, and then Venus in the heart chakra zone, in the green zone, and then that's Mercury forming the other vertex of this triangle in the kind of blue, like throat chakra realms. It's fun because we have Mercury in the throat and the communication, and Venus in the heart and the love, and the moon here in this kind of sacral creative place. But even there, what am I doing but telling these planets who they are and telling them what they do? So I think when I say astronomy is really important for astrologers, it's first important for me to say that the way that I use this word astronomy might be different than how most of us think of it, which is like the rationalist scientists who are dropping gigantic telescopes on sacred mountains and narrowing their view and looking far away long ago, and focusing on big bangs. And like, for me, it's actually about getting out and widening the view, and reflecting upon the heavens. And the challenge for the astrologer, like when I go here, like this is a triple conjunction in Gemini of Moon and Mercury and Venus, and I know how to say it grammatically correctly in that. It's so hard for me to go out there and listen instead of speak, right? It's so, I mean, the example that I use, which I think many of us are familiar with, many of us seekers, is that you're out on a hike, and let me ask you, Amanda, when well, you're not the best person to ask anyway, but let me ask you, if you're out on a hike and let's say oh, what's the name of the Hawaiian raven? Do you know?
Mm-mm.
Anyway, so let's just name a bird. Let's say there's a pretty rare raven. I think it's the I won't try to say. There's a pretty rare raven, sadly, now in Hawaii. It didn't used to be rare. But let's say you're out hiking, and big raven comes by, like huge raven, and does a thing that you know is for you, and then raven's out. Like, what is your response, and where do you go with that?
Mm. First response would be complete giddiness. I just got to witness something awesome. And then, actually, the truth is, I would probably look into what the medicine of the raven is.
How would
And
you do that?
I would probably go online, if I'm just being completely honest. Now, I can sense that a better response would be to ask and just ask what was that, what message did that raven have for me, and see what I receive. But I think if I'm totally honest with you, my first response would be I want to look up raven medicine.
And now that we've talked about this, maybe you would just ask first and then go look
Exactly.
it up.
Exactly.
Um, who would you ask?
Myself, God. I would just ask, and
Yeah.
normally some like a question would come, but I guess I could literally ask the raven, which would be really cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, and so you see what I'm getting after, right?
Yes.
Because there are so many wonderful resources now. Yeah, where we can go and find out what Raven Medicine's about. And so, what was this message? But first of all, let me check in with your initial response because it's so important. Giddiness. Oh my gosh, what a majestic being. I'm so fortunate. I'm so glad I'm here. I'm in the right place at the right time to have this amazing experience. I could never even explain this in words, you know? That thing, that's why astronomy, right? Because
Mhm.
for me, astronomy is simply getting outside, getting out of like the thinker mind and getting out into the body mind, right? Getting into my experience of this. And so the practice I'll typically lead people through first is like lie down on your back, you know, bring whatever you need to like not worry about bugs and things, and close your eyes and just become the earth. You know, and there's a whole the drum comes out and we talk about the grasses are growing from your body and you know what animals are coming and all that, you know. But then open Earth's eyes to the sky. And now what do you see? Right? And I will say this every time, like the appropriate password to the temple of the sky is giddiness and wonder and awe and like childlike joy. And it's so difficult. Like I train astrologers often to learn the sky. And there's just, yeah, as it is in any learning environment. I mean, I say this literally having written a test with multiple choice and stuff this morning. So, you know, I feel a little hypocritical saying this. But in any learning environment, we've developed so much shame about what we don't know, right? That we forget to celebrate it. And the wonderful thing about this craft of astrology, if we call it that, is it's endless. You can't know it all. And this is so true with the sky. So when I get out in the sky with people, it's like I just can set a timer to first 20 minutes. It's going to be everybody shaming themselves for not knowing their stars, right? And then we get past, and I don't even want to rush them past that, you know, like have your process, fine. It's like, great, okay. But let me just say, like the Temple of the Skies, it's never going to open to the password called shame and guilt. And I'm not good enough. Like the password is I could never, right? So as soon as we release the idea that we could possibly know the thing, it starts teaching us directly. It says, come on in. Let me show you a couple of things, right? And so then I'll say, okay, open your eyes and like, there's a star. What star is it? People say, which star? I said, no, you decide. Like, what star is speaking to you, right? And like, well, it's not that bright. Good, right? Because it's hard not to pick the shiniest thing. And cool, what's its name, right? And people say, what do you mean? Like, I don't know. That's what I was saying. I was like, no, just soften up and ask that star what its name. Introduce yourself, you know? And I mean, I've had really wonderful experiences when I do that. Like, one of my favorites was, you know, I was at my dad's place when he lived in Oregon. I was in a hot tub, and it was cool because it'd be cold, but I could stay warm and just really, I was really learning the sky a lot when I was there as a result. Also, because I wanted to be in my own space. I don't need to get into my own family dynamics. Anyway, I'm tuning into the star, and I introduce myself, and I just start hearing really clearly Bob Marley's Revolution. As if that song was like playing. I mean, I actually looked around to see if that was playing in the house or something. And interestingly, Marley was born the same day as my dad. But I have like a deep connection to that song, to its lyrics, to the groove. Like that song has been really important for me in my life many different times, you know, and especially like coming into astrology and looking at Marley's chart, you know, it's gone into this other place. But so like for me, that star is Bob. And it has it has an Arabic name that goes back a long time, and I know that well, and that's the one I speak publicly and all that, but that star is Bob, and it's that specific part of Bob Marley, and for me, that speaks of revolution and the change that needs to happen in that. And then fascinatingly and not, when I go back into the ancient records of what cats have been saying about the star for thousands of years, it's about revolutions, right? And so when you, first of all, understand that giddiness fuels the opening to the sacred, right? Because we are children of God, if you will, or whatever you want to call that. And then ask, because you've entered the temple, right? Some answer is going to come in. And we're foolish if we think it's going to happen in English. I mean, I've had that. When I got my marching orders, if you will, it was Jupiter speaking to me in English for 4 hours, and I had to convince myself that that was actually happening because that seemed like a better option than psychotic break. But typically that's not the gig. Typically they speak to us in the language of the birds, as it's called, in the language of symbol. And there is, I don't know if you can hear all the blue
Wow.
jays in here.
Yes.
Um,
Definitely heard those birds.
Yeah, in the language, there is certainly an old standing symbolic language of which astrology is part. But much of this is about your symbolic language. And Bob Marley's revolution, for example, would mean something different to you than it would for me. So if you hear that song, you would likely hear that from a different star, which speaks more to that connotation. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, we should go to the books. Now, when astrologers actually do go outside to look to the sky, it could be one of these really cool events, like a triple conjunction of Moon with visible Mercury and Venus as evening stars. And we saw that was beautiful, right? And let me show that again.
Well, Brett, I remember the first time seeing something like that in the sky, and because you all throw around words like conjunction and ingress and assume everyone knows what that is, and for the longest time I was like, conjunction, what is conjunction? But then I saw it. You can see it in the chart. It's like, okay, but then to see it in the sky, it's like, oh, it's literally close to each other in the sky. Amazing. I mean, it's this like putting the dots together is, and again, I can see where your students have that process of shame because there's a little bit of like, well, duh. But at the same time, when you make that connection, it's the astrology comes to life. Whereas before it's this like flat thing that you're studying with your mind. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, it's alive. It's moving. I'm in it.
And I'm in it, right? So it's not, my mind's not in it. My mind can't be in a thing, actually. My mind's not even in my brain, right? my brain is channeling my mind, right? So my brain is the radio that's tuned to the frequency of my mind, wherever that exists. Like the air and the fire are outside, right? For me to be in the thing, I've got to put my body in the thing, and now my heart is there. Right? And I mean, there's age-old practices where I let the mind do like body things, like mala beads, for example, right? Because now I'm counting in a like repeatable, right, like body way. That's like a heartbeat. So right, so suddenly instead of counting, which I usually do with my mind, I'm doing with my body. And then if I chant at the same time, right, now I'm doing something, right, like repetitive in a sense through the vocal expression. You just kind of flip that flow and it brings you into the heart. And so my game always is finding more and more ways where I can express and, more importantly, like invite people to experience the astrological information, like not in the head, but to experience it, because the head doesn't experience things. It leads us to the gateway, right? So yeah, I mean, let's look at this image, because this is Moon and Venus. Like, I just happen to be in the right time zone, right, in the right location for Moon and Venus to be basically exactly conjoined in this moment. So what's the issue, right? Because if you look at this on a chart, it said 1930 something Gemini, and then the tropical zodiac. For both of them, they were like exactly on top of one another. And that's not what's happening here, right? And so, like, another wonderful thing about coming to a sky practice or a sky witness or a sky experience is you get to learn more that what we're playing with is a game of, it's a model, and it's a game of averages and estimates, right? And you can start breaking out of that mold just when you go to the sky and watch. Like, if people were willing to wake up and see Jupiter and Saturn before sunrise right now, or I've been watching them for years now, and just it's been Saturn over here, Jupiter over here. Well, let me think of the camera. Jupiter over here and Saturn over here, and every month it's just like getting closer, and every now and then he's like, they retrograde and he'll go, and then getting closer, and now they're like this. And their conjunction in December at the south solstice will be a near occultation, which is like the conjunction not only in longitude, which is zodiac degree, but in latitude, because planets are above or below this ecliptic we were talking about too. That's why Moon and Venus are not on top of each other in that image that we're looking at, right? Moon has south latitude and Venus is north, so they're like 4 degrees apart this way, even though they're in the same place on the circle like this, right? So we'll see like Jupiter, like I've just been waking up, and yesterday I cast a map at this time when I was like, Jupiter was just like, look at me, and literally I just felt this call to like square your shoulders up to me. It was this like commandment, you know? So, okay, cool. And then I wondered, where am I facing? And then I played with some maps, and I was like, oh, I'm facing Easter Island, like 4,800 miles or 54 miles away from me. Like Jupiter is like directing me somehow. Jupiter, this, you know, this one of the adventure and the journey. And he's like somehow like directing me to this place I've always wanted to go. You know what I mean? And so then I went back to sleep, and I totally went there in my dreams. It was killer.
Wow. You know, I think a lot of people have experiences communing with nature on Earth this way. You know, I think a lot of people in our audience would say, yes, you know, I've heard communication from trees or from animals or from, you know, plants and rocks and things like that. I mean, maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people can really resonate with that. But there's a leap that is made to, we can have that same level of communication with the planets, and it's no different. And and this is, you know, me, I'll just air some more embarrassing things about my process here, because I always thought of nature as the things here on this planet, on Earth. Mm-hmm. The time when I realized that nature also included the stars and the moon and the planets, it was like, oh, it's all nature and it's all me. Mm. And I'm it and it's me. And just that the whole process of what you're describing is this journey, or this process of coming back to ourselves, and that conjunction or occultation of all these disparate parts of ourselves coming together. Mm. And so it's an amazing journey. And I love that you bring this piece in. So you are now quoted, because we've put this quote in several different places, and it's from the 2020 Global Forecast Marathon we did in January. But you were already alluding to this solstice. So now I'm going to call it the North Solstice that's coming up here in June. And you're going to be our inner circle guide at the time. You chose that month because of the solstice, and you were like, I want to be the guide that month. Tell us why you see this as particularly important. Your quote is, this solstice is one of the most important events of our entire lifetime. And so obviously we're having this year, this 2020 year, that is like this important event of our lifetime. But then within that cycle, there is this particular moment that you've had your eye on for a long time. So can you tell us why?
Yeah, I think I said the astronomical and therefore astrological event of your lifetime. Although you did
say the.
Yeah, and then I usually back after that one and say actually it was the North Solstice in 2001. Okay, yeah, and I realized that I did this thing. I have a mantra called "These many branches I'm called to climb all emanate from the same trunk," so I can like soothe that one in me who feels shamed for not finishing a thought before seven new ones interest me. But we were speaking earlier about that meshing of the two gears of the tropical and the sidereal. Right? And so I'll say very importantly, the tropical zodiac is the zodiac of Earth, and the sidereal zodiac is the zodiac of the heavens, if you will. So there's a zodiac like of the below and of the above. I work with them personally by working with tropical signs and with constellations and star alignments, but I find a lot of beauty in speaking about the two. So you asked if, oh, is that what's happening now? Is this alignment between these two zodiacs that, you know, for the most part, tropical in the Western practice and sidereal in the Eastern practice. So certainly there is a rich tropical tradition in Vedic astrology and a sidereal tradition in Western astrology, just to be clear. And that's not what's happening. So usually when we're looking at where we are in an astrological age, it's about not the north or the south, but the east point. And the east point is the 0 Aries point in the tropical zodiac. That's where even the astronomers, they begin the measurement they call celestial longitude there. We call it tropical zodiac. East is the place of new beginnings, of new rise. And actually that 0 Aries point, it is due east, not of Hawaii or California. Like that's different in our skies right now. Like what's rising for me won't rise for you for a few hours yet. But east from the center of the world, right? That's where we are all connected. So if you would, Amanda, will you raise your hand above your... Yeah, so you're pointing to a different star than I am. Okay. And actually, Earth spins so quickly that even at the end of this sentence, I'll be pointing to a different star than I was when I lifted my arms. But if you and I now move down through our spines and we can meet in the heart of Gaia, in the center of Earth, we're connected there in every moment, you know? That's actually where we measure the placement of planets from, which is an intriguing thing, right? So I'm going to go on a bit of a journey and I'm going to come back to this question, I promise you. But one of the reasons why astronomy is so important to me, because you asked me that before, and why I feel it's important for astrologers to know astronomy, okay? And so what I mean by astronomy is the physical experience of the stuff, okay? What we call astrology today is actually the second, it's one half of astrology. Astrology is astronomy and correspondences, okay? Astronomy is the measurable heavenly happenings, the quantity, and the correspondences is the immeasurable, the qualities. Here's an example I love to give. Right. So you just had some experience, and you might be like, "Oh, that's a little light of mine," and you know. People out there are like, that's really loud all of a sudden. And right, we all had different experiences, whatever. That's the quality of that thing. The quantity of that thing is there were frequencies, there were amplitudes. For some, that was too loud. You know, but we can measure that stuff. In music, I can put a ruler to it, right? So if a tree falls in the wood and nobody's there to hear it, did it make a sound? As far as like that's concerned, yes, it vibrated the medium, you know. But that's noise. Sound is what you do with that. Sound requires ears. The ears receive the noise. That's the body, mind, and an experience happens. And the beautiful sacred science of musical harmony can help me understand why this kind of sound is likely to give a crowd this kind of experience versus that one. But it can also help me understand why, depending on the crowd and what they listen to coming up and all that, you know, I could expect a different kind of experience. Now, a sister tradition to harmony is astronomy. But astronomy, like in the day in the quadrivium in the sacred sciences, it meant the measurable and the immeasurable. It's like what we call astrology today, or like, it's what we call half of astrology today. So now we have these two different things. We have astronomy, we have the cats that are out there with their rulers and telescopes measuring stuff. And then we have the astrologers who are using the ephemerides that they're printing out of like planetary tables and locations and using that to heal and feel and know and grow. And I'm first and foremost on the latter half, okay? But what I found certainly without a doubt in my own practice is that the more intimately I'm connected to and knowing of the physical, the measurable, the more intimately I can know and therefore attempt to express the unknowable, the immeasurable, right? Because the Saturn, Pluto conjunction in January or the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in December of this year, they're going to dance you differently than they dance me. And our art is so developed in such that I can look at your nativity versus my own and have some ideas about where in your life that will likely speak. And am I going to tell you exactly what's going to happen? No, I kind of personally feel like that's a fool's errand. Sometimes it works. And, when we're young in our craft, I think a lot of us lean towards that crystal ball thing, which is, I mean, it's pretty amazing when you are in a place and you tell somebody exactly what and when and where, and, but less and less, I'm so much less interested in that than I once was, and honoring that, by just like witnessing it. And so the other part, there's a few other answers to that. So astronomy also, because this thing that I call astronomy, like, it's being forgotten by the astronomers today. The astronomers who have chosen, and I would say as a necessity to survive in the time of the burnings, when, I mean, here's a really fantastic example. Michelangelo painted, the human anatomy on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I mean, the famous painting of God reaching out to animate Adam is the human brain. Why disguise it in divine images? Because it was completely illegal to cut a human open to study medicine at the time, right? Like, no cadavers, and if you were caught, you would be burned or worse, right? And so you can't teach that information exoterically, you have to teach it esoterically. And so this language of the birds that I was mentioning earlier, it's also interestingly a language that you see mirrored in the geometry and the architecture and the alignments of temples, of churches. My favorite astrological calendar is at the Vatican. Washington D.C. has been a primary place where I've spent a lot of work showing that it's a star calendar, which is a very interesting thing. And by the way, they were looking at, amongst many different places. They're very much focused, I believe I've shown, on this coming June solstice in 2020, or at least this time, which is about a 50-year window. I'll get right back to that. So another reason astronomy for me is to preserve the ancient way of connecting to the marriage of heavens and earth. Like just watching the truth that the sun sets in a different place. I mean, you and I were hanging out not long ago with a great astrologer who has an amazing view of the West and wasn't aware of that, right? So that's just one of many reflections that I have. I'm not trying to again, I don't want to present any shame, but to astrology. I'll oftentimes ask people when we're outside, hey, point to the third house right now. And people will be spinning around. Where's the Gemini constellation? I'm like, what? And if you ask an astrologer, okay, what's the difference between the houses 7 to 12 and the houses 1 to 6? And they'll say 1 to 6 is below the horizon. And it's and yet we go outside and you're pointing up when I ask you where the third house is right now. We know it's below the ground in our mind. Let's connect that to our body. And so not only is it one thing that can help astrology become more embodied, more grounded, more practical, if you will, but it's also going to help us maintain this thing that the rationalist scientist side of that most of us think of astronomy in our day and age has completely pushed away because it might have been married to such words as Scorpio or, whatever. Astrological nonsense, archaic pseudoscience. And a lot of that, I think, is basically born out of the need for this scientific quest to separate itself from spirituality, or else you're burned at the stake. Okay. So, and then speaking of, that kind of brings to one of my personal reasons for getting after the astronomy, which is I was taught in school that astrology was utter nonsense. And I believed it. You know, I mean, I felt like I ate enough psychedelics in my day to like crack the mind open, you know, but when astrology started coming in for me, I finally just come to a place in my life, and of course it came through a rock bottoming, if you will, where like I had to start asking, and I started following the symbols and the signs and letting synchronicity lead its way. And I was asking this question for more than a year: what am I? You know, what am I supposed to do? And astrology was the answer, and it was like, holy smokes. Right? Like, I would have never in 1,000 years, I'm not one of those fortunate souls who is a third generation astrologer. I'm one of those fortunate souls who was a total like skeptic according to the training of my, you know, scholastic programming. So now knowing that, and I, you know, I did say fortunate for a reason there, because I think when we break out of barriers that others set for us, we can gain a lot of strength in doing so, and that it's one of the ways of the training, right? So that's a very kind of Saturnian way of the training. But now I'm very hesitant to believe the authorities, right? Because the authorities who I trusted in school, not because they had some malicious intent to miseducate me, because they were sharing the knowledge that they were taught to be true and just parroting it. Not all of them. I've had some great teachers, but I have a lot of teachers who were not passionate and who were simply repeating the things that they learned to be right. And I'm very hesitant to do that as an astrologer, because of that experience. So when I read something in a book, or even when, and it's kind of rare in astrology, there is consensus agreement about what a thing means, I want to go to nature and ask, right? So why is the 12th house hidden things? That's the weirdest thing ever, because that's the place where the sun rises. You can't see it when it's in the first house, it's below the ground. It rises into the 12th house, and suddenly, I mean, you've had this experience, Amanda, up at Haleakala or somewhere sacred, and chanting for the sun to rise, and then you don't stop chanting until the sun has risen, you know? There is evidence that it survived wherever it was in between sunset and now. It has come, you know, the day has begun. And somehow we say that's hidden things. But if you go out there and ask, as I have again and again, and it you know, you said this earlier, like it's these simple things, right? When you were saying it, it was kind of like just to reveal another thing about where I'm off or whatever. So that's totally where you're on, because when we have those little simple things, like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't realize that, right? That's the magic. And that's the kind of thing that happens in the chart, you know, and that's the kind of thing that really happens when you're outside. So for a while I was like, oh, 12th house hidden things because of mountains and trees. Like I lived in Seattle where I could never see the sun until it was in the 11th because there was a hill to the east. But now I realize, yeah, the sun is the only one of these beings through Saturn, the traditional planets, and why they're traditional is because we can see them. But it's the only one where I can't tell you what star it's aligned to. I have no idea. I mean, I will get really burned, my white face, you know, or maybe go blind trying to tell you like what constellation the sun's with right now, right? That's not the game for the moon, which is why like the moon was the oldest teacher of our sky connection. The sun illuminates the earth and it blinds the sky, right? So that 12th house, because that's the place where the sun rises, and no longer can we tell, I can't even see Mercury or Venus, who might have been there on the morning side as they soon will be, etc., you know? And then how do I know where the sun is. Well, I take out my phone and I push the app. But what if that's not happening? So at night, and I teach people this, like how to see the houses, how to see the signs, how to know where that planet is, how to see that it's low or high, out of bounds, whatever, We can see it in space with your face. And it's really like, of course, it's a practice. It requires devotion and passion and experience, as all learnings do. But the cool thing about astronomy, just as it is with music, like the subject is the teacher. Actually, that's true with all real things, And so with the sun, I'm going to have to, and this is a really wonderful thing, by night I can tell time with the stars. By day I can tell time with my shadow. Right? And there's ancient practices of where is the sun rising or setting on the mountains. Right, you've seen this from where you live in Hawaii. It's where is the moon rising and setting? How long is my shadow today versus next month? And these are the things that some astronomers still teach. Unfortunately, there's a really beautiful awakening of a field of academia now called archaeoastronomy, where they're looking at the alignments of sacred sites that are all around the world, like the Heiaus in Hawaii, for example, where there's so many great star teachings that have been transmitted over the ages that are aligned, So fortunately, there is some return to the truth that the ancient ones were practicing a type of astronomy that, in a sense, we've forgotten. But I think just as we narrow our view and look so far away and so long ago, we're losing that connection to Earth astronomy, as I like to say. So people often assume when I'm teaching astronomy for astrologers that it's going to be big bangs and solar system formation and the HR diagram and whatever. And I do have to get a little nerdy in places, and but it's really, I call it sacred astronomy. It's like, let's go outside and have an experience. And astrologers, what if I went to a triple conjunction of Moon and Mercury and Venus in Gemini, and instead of telling them what they were, what if I went out there and asked? And what if I did that before I read what Gemini or what Rick or what Anne have to say about that thing? I like actually hesitate to write. So all right, so back to the two gears. So we're typically looking to the east point. Why? East is the rise, new beginnings. Watch a sunrise, and you will be reminded of this. And so there is a point that is due east of the center of Earth, where we are all connected. And we look to where that point is aligned to the heavens and say this describes the age in which we live. And that east point is now pointing to the constellation. The astronomers called Pisces. I prefer to say fish to differentiate the two, as I first learned to do in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School with Daniel Jamario. And there's no doubt that the east equinox point is aligned to the head of the fish. And in that criterion, and it's definitely not the only one, we are still in the age of Aquarius. If we look for the first alignment to a star of the constellation I'll call Water Bearer, you're looking at like 3000 AD. If you're looking at the precession of that 0 Aries tropical point to 0 sidereal Pisces, we're 6 degrees off right now. A degree takes 72 years. That means it's going to be about 432 years in the future. It's going to be somewhere around, well, 2400-ish. 2444 is the number I like to say because it sounds cool. So don't hold your breath.
You're talking about moving into the age of Aquarius.
Yeah, according to those criteria.
Right.
But there's other things to look at, okay? So there are things that are markers of our age that a lot of people are sleeping on. Actually, let me show you a picture. It's a joke from a recent presentation I gave because I just feel like giving it again. But there are some indications of our age like this one. Or let me even rewind because I just gave you those dates. There are some dates that Dane Rudger offers, which is like when the royal star Regulus processed into the sign of Virgo, and that happened on August 13th, 2012. He was also looking to this star, Betelgeuse, when it moves into tropical Cancer, which is indicated by this point here. And that happens in about 100 years. And Dane Ridjar was perhaps the greatest astrologer of modern times, certainly worth listening to. But a thing that he was missing, I think, was Orion's club pointing right to that Cancer space in our day and age. And I'll get back to that because that is the north point, right? So tropical Cancer point. This is the point in space where in every moment forever, Earth's northern spine is leaning towards, right? So this is the point, like in our day and age, the June solstice sun, the sun's Cancer ingress is sitting right here on Orion's club. Like you can't see it because it's the sun, but in the apps, like you're looking at Orion like making a giant snow cone, sun cone in the sky. It looks cool, right? Well, the Celts called him the high man and talked about this being the hand of the high man, okay? There's a thing in Bengali where this was time man. So maybe tuning us into a really important moment in time, maybe when the solstice points get there. Because this, of course, in the northern hemisphere means that the height of the light, or if I speak like mystically, the glory of the king, is now aligned to the hand of time man, or the hand of the high man, okay? Jesus said this thing, everybody's looking to this thing he had to say when the disciples asked where to prepare the Passover, right? So this we know as the Last Supper. And he's like, go into the city, there ye shall find a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house in which he dwells and set it up upstairs, basically. So, right, so we've talked about often, oh, that's the avatar of the new age. Like Christ is speaking about the dawning of the age of Aquarius, the water bearer, but when? And then the next page, it says when, because he says when he's on trial and they're encouraging him to blaspheme publicly so that they can justify his coming crucifixion. They say, is this true what you said, that you're the son of the beloved one? And he says, yes, I am. He's basically saying, I am the son of God. And he says, and you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven and sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One. Okay? Well, the Mighty One is Orion. He's used in that same language in other biblical passages. And you can't see it in this stellarium image, but the Milky Way runs right through here. And the Milky Way is the clouds of heaven. The Son of Man is called the Sun. All right, so big reveal, Christ, Son, 12 disciples, the 12 zodiac signs, Mary, moon. There's 3 of them, waning moon, full moon, waxing moon. 3 at the crucifixion anyway. I could go on and on like that. Anyway, so it's a really powerful thing that the sun, which aligns to this place of space like every year forever, but in our day and age, and the window that I use for this, what we can call galactic alignment, is like 1975 to 2025. Because what happens is as this precessional motion is going down, and it's like a 26,000 year cycle that takes Earth's poles through this great circle in the heavens. And as north and south change, so do east and west. So the east point moves through the constellations. And most people are like, okay, it's aligned to the fish, we're in the age of Pisces. When it's aligned to the water bearer, that's the age of Aquarius, right? But they're sleeping on the spine. And like, so what happens is, like, if I showed you this from a few hundred years ago, you would find this Cancer point over here. And if I showed it to you in like 1,000 years from now, you see it up in here, okay? So in our day and age, it's moving through this sacred place of the sky that the Lakota call the sacred hoop, and they say our souls come from there, and it's the Anipi in the sky where we'll be purified when we die. And there's just so many of the traditions speak to the mysteries of this place, and now it carries the height of the light for northern hemisphere locations like Jerusalem, okay? But a thing that I love that's happening now that a lot of people aren't seeing because we're so interested, and we should be, in this circle, this yellow circle. You'll see it's called the ecliptic here. That's the path of the sun. Okay, and for the most part, the planets. This blue circle is a different plane. That's the plane of Earth's spin, of our daily motion. So that's just Earth's equator, projected into the heavens. It's called the celestial equator. And so stars that are on there, like Orion's belt is, they'll be 12 hours above the horizon and 12 hours below. And this to me is a cult who was basically setting up a star map to observe this. Okay, you have in our day and age, and this is like a small window in this 26,000 year cycle. Okay, in our day and age, you have Orion's belt rising like a pillar in the east for the northern hemisphere experience. And so the joke is, oh, if only there was some esoteric cult who was like honoring that. And here you go. I'll show you just a couple more things. Like Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial looks like the Emperor card. I like to say check out the feet, but the Emperor card said to be the Aries card. And the Aries point rises due east. Okay, and Lincoln's Memorial is due west of the Washington Monument. So where he sits on this throne, he's watching, and this won't happen forever. In our day and age, he's watching Orion's belt rise like this pillar that is the Washington Monument. You can zoom out, and the Lincoln Memorial is made to look like the Parthenon, by the way, in Athens. On the left is the White House. On the right is the Jefferson Memorial, which is made to look like the Pantheon in Rome, which also out the front door is staring at an obelisk. This one's stolen from Egypt. This one built to look like an Egyptian obelisk. That's in the front door kind of view of the Jefferson Memorial. We turn around and we look from the Capitol building. You see the Lincoln Memorial is due west, okay, with the Washington Monument between. There's the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue this way, and the Jefferson Memorial on Maryland Avenue this way. And in our day and age, Orion's belt sets into the west horizontally. See, so the three belt stars are these three temples. So there's all sorts of amazing things in DC. Should I show you a few more of them?
It's so fascinating. And I just want to make a note for those of you listening on the podcast right now. You can't see what we're seeing. I highly recommend that you go over to YouTube and check out this video, because it's so fascinating. He's showing lots of different images of Washington, D.C. right now and telling this story with Orion and the high hand. What do they call it?
The hand of the high man was a
hand of the
Celtic
high man.
prophecy of our time. Yeah.
Okay, keep going. Yeah.
So here's the high woman. All right. This is the statue called Freedom, or some call it America. That was it was delayed in when it was meant to put on the Capitol building in D.C. because of the Civil War. It was constructed by Thomas Crawford was the architect, but there's no statue in D.C. that's allowed to be taller than the statue of the goddess. And she is atop of the Capitol building, which is meant to represent the people. Now, I already told you that I'm rejecting.
Brett? Wait,
what's that?
Who made that rule?
I don't know specifically, but I love it.
Me too. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of DC that interestingly is built to honor the goddess, the virgin, like Isis, Mary, that line.
Wow.
And there's been a lot of researchers who've spoken about this, like David Ovison comes to mind for sure in his book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital. But actually, when I went to DC to confirm a lot of things that I read in that amazing book, what I realized is a good amount of it was actually wrong, astronomically speaking, and then I tuned into this whole Orion thing. But Orion and Isis were a pair. That's like the king and queen. I mean, those are the Greek names for Aset and Asur, who like of Kemet. I'm realizing that I'm kind of biting off more than I meant to here. But anyway, so on top of the Capitol building, there is a 19.5-foot bronze structure. I think it represents the Metonic cycle, the 19 feet, because the lunations sync with the years every 19 years in the calendar. And she's staring northeast towards the summer solstice sunrise. Okay, so of course in DC, that's the north solstice sunrise. The December solstice sunrise is over the Library of Congress, which on top of the building has a flame. And the floor of that building, the Library of Congress, is the zodiac. And this has been one of my most important actual teachers because it helped me tune into the truth that the zodiac, the tropical zodiac, is of the directions, right? So when I say like it's tied to the world tree, it's tied to Earth's rotational axis, which defines north and south. Like I learned a lot of that from spending time here at the Library of Congress and like standing up with Athena, who's up on the staircase above this, and like Medusa, and just staring down at this. And oh, that looks really cool, but why did they do the zodiac as a square? And the sun in the middle has 19 rays, which again is this Metonic thing that connects the sun and the moon. But in between the constellation or the signs of Virgo and Libra is the west point, and that's directed in DC. I mean, it's all aligned properly, right? So when you zoom out and you look at these temples, like a lot of people call attention to some really interesting geometry in the DC streets, like this pentacle or pentagram that's pointing to the White House. And then the White House on that line points to the House of the Temple, which is the headquarters of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. It's this is maybe a not an open-hearted thing to say, but my experience of that building is it's really creepy. I've like, there's these amazing, like beautiful sphinxes out front and this like wrought, like kind of gold, like serpentine lattice door and these phoenixes, but there's just this weird, so every time I'm there I'm like, maybe I should join this scene, like I want to know the secrets. And last time I was happening in DC, because I lead tours in DC and show them these things, but I was just the day before tripping on why are there no pigeons in this city. And so I'm looking at this temple and I'm like, maybe I should just join up and like cut to the chase, man. And this falcon flies in. It was a Merlin falcon with a pigeon that it had just caught, and it lands in the building and it looks at me while killing this pigeon and shaking its head no. And I definitely didn't have to go to the internet to like interpret that symbol. Anyway, so this line between the White House and the House of the Temple, the headquarters of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, it's exactly 1 mile. It's exactly north-south. It, in fact, was meant to be the meridian in the mind of, the people of the builders of the so-called New Atlantis. So we know the meridian, like the prime meridian is in Greenwich, and Paris tried to put their name into the hat and got some votes, and so did the United States. I think they got 1 vote. But this was meant to be, in these builders' mind, like the prime meridian of the world. It goes further to a place called Meridian Park, which has a fountain of 13 stages. And from above, it looks like an Egyptian Ankh. And at the top of that fountain is this beautiful statue of Joan of Arc, like fully armored, who has her, you're looking at the screen, Amanda, what constellation does that look like? Orion, right? And she's staring right up at the same altitude that Orion, in our day and age, that Orion's sword points to. The North solstice, the summer solstice sunrise, okay? Or sun at the midheaven. So a more famous pentacle in DC, of course, is the Pentagon, which from the White House, you see the Phoenix constellation setting into the Pentagon. Now, FDR, right? The Phoenix, you should know, is a symbol of like Freemasonry, and FDR, who, the Pentagon was built under his watch. He was a master mason, a 32nd degree master mason, they say. He designed much of the Pentagon, it said, and it's built, interestingly, in the units of what we know as the megalithic yard, which was employed by like the builders of such places as like Stonehenge. And it said that he had it moved from its intended position like really late in the game. And it's moved in such a way that from the Pentagon, you see the ram rising over the Capitol building, and the Capitol building sees the scorpion setting into the Pentagon. So these constellations, the scorpion and the ram, traditionally, of course, are associated with the signs of Scorpio and Aries, traditionally ruled by Mars, the god of war, and this is the Pentagon, right? So usually I start this conversation in a very different place, and it gives me an opportunity to say this. I don't necessarily in any way think that like the current leaders of America, if you call them that, are tuned into like the truths of the star alignments and the way that these buildings are temples. I think that there's likely, I mean, I should just say truthfully, just too much blood on the hands of this like project who came with the genocides and killed so many people in this land and in many other lands, like in Hawaii where you live, and all over the place, right? Like, if there is some promise that's here trying to align to this great powerful happening of our day and age, it's hard to say that it could be seen through. But other things are like just this, like astronomy is now seems to have completely forgotten the sacred way that we call astrology. Like, presidents back in the day, I can imagine, were tuned into this. I will say that the Capitol building in many regards was meant to be like this Stargate. It's a kind of, it's a stretch to say that, but in the way that I could say that the Great Pyramid of Giza was meant to be so. George Washington's tomb was designed in the Capitol building. He was not buried there. I don't think he was actually ever intended to be, because I think it's meant to be a tomb for the rebirthing of anyone who goes there, like seeking to connect, right? And I think that this has long been pushed aside and forgotten. But let me show you a couple more images. So from the White House, there's the Masonic Compass, which opens
Brett, and this
towards...
is going to come back to the June solstice
Yeah,
that we're
totally.
about to come to,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. So the Masonic Compass points to the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue and to the Jefferson Memorial down Maryland Avenue, okay? But it's also the headings, it's 20 degrees north and south of due west. Due west from the Capitol building, you see Orion's belt setting through the Washington Monument onto the Lincoln Memorial. You see Sirius setting onto the Jefferson Memorial, and you see Aldebaran, the Eye of the Bull, the Royal Star, setting onto the White House. This is something that will not happen for a long period of time. This is like, this is now, basically, is what I should say. And so these temples are aligned to the setting of these stars, and this is also the D.C. cross, like Christ on the cross. It's Capitol building, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, and the White House, and the Lincoln Memorial and White House and Jefferson Memorial, they make the cross. People have said that the Washington Monument was meant to be aligned on the meridian that runs from White House to the House of the Temple to the Meridian Park, and then the other direction from the White House, which is south, to the Jefferson Memorial. And it's said that the Washington Monument could not be placed where it was intended to initially because the ground was too soft, because this is like reclaimed land from the Potomac. But I'll tell you that it was entirely intentional, and this is what I've added to this DC thing, which is that these temples were constructed in such a way that their geometry perfectly matched the geometry of Orion's belt stars in the sky. And they were not the first to do this. This is the same geometry that was employed by the builders of the Great Pyramids of Giza long ago. So the three pyramids of Giza and these three temples, which are Jefferson Memorial, Washington Monument, and White House, map the geometry of the three Orion belt stars, which in our day and age, and this is a very rare thing, it won't happen again for 26,000 years, set due west, okay? And this is one thing I learned building this presentation, which I just gave at NORWAC, so you can get it there if you want to see it in full. But it's like an as above thing, because what I realized by working with these DC temples in this alignment that configures to Orion's belt stars and to the stars of Sirius and Orion's belt and Aldebaran, is that Orion's belt maps this geometry of Sirius, Orion's belt, and Aldebaran. That's what I mean by as above. And that's like a forever in the heavens, like crazy thing that I just tuned into. And I think it has a lot to say, but I don't even want to try to tell you what I feel it means yet or what's been coming in. It's just crazy. But I will say that when you map these temples, not only to Orion's belt stars as they do, but to Sirius, Orion's belt, and Aldebaran, as people watching the video will see in their screen now, the Washington Monument becomes Orion's sword, if you want to say. But the very important mythos that's tied from Kemet, the place we now call Egypt, to Orion is that this is Osiris, who was cut into 14 pieces, murdered by his brother. He was put back together, except for one piece they couldn't find, which was his phallus. And then an heir had not yet been born to he and Isis, queen. And so Thoth created this magical golden phallus for Osiris. And Isis turned herself into a bird and flew above it and became miraculously impregnated by their child, who was born in a sense of a miraculous virgin birth and who was known to be the son of man. His name was Horus, and Horus was the avenger. He defeats his uncle Set every time the sun rises, and Set wins when the sun sets, is the age-old story. So, but then Osiris became the constellation we call Orion in the sky. So Orion's sword, as we call it, which is below the belt, not surprising, is the golden phallus of Osiris. And this is what I believe these temple builders were looking towards, and very importantly, in that sword of Orion, in that golden phallus of Osiris, is the Orion Nebula, which is this really powerful birthplace of stars. And I feel that this story from Egypt, that our sun, like there's no mistaking that Horus was born to be the son of our sky, and in the Christian tradition, much more esoteric, right? That our sun was born in this place. And there's Maya tradition and many others that would seem to agree. So like the most powerful, and for people looking on the screen right now, I'm going through 3 eclipses, and one was in 1982, one was in 2001, and this is an image I'm showing of another kind of Orion figure who's the Statue of Liberty, and I'm showing a picture of when that Statue of Liberty could be seen with twin towers, just as Orion in the sky is seen with twins, the Gemini twin constellation. And of course, that's not happening now. And the general energetic invite is that things got really screwy at that time in 2001. They're exploding now. In fact, a lot of shady laws that were written then are really starting to show up now, and we should pay attention. But more importantly, like on a personal level, this is a time where we are encouraged, this great stargate that's opening, to realign ourselves to our powerful way. I'll say more about that in a second. Let me just show you like what the goddess shows us in D.C., this Statue of Freedom. When we walk into the Capitol building, the rotunda is painted with this kind of amazingly strange and beautiful painting that was painted by Constantino Brumuti, who was actually literally broken out of Vatican prison to come paint this. It said he was arrested for like being a practicing Mason. But what I'm showing on the screen is this statue of George Washington, who's like looking up at himself becoming a god, because this painting, it's called the Apotheosis of George Washington, all right, which means Washington becoming a god. In the frieze around the dome, there's all these paintings that, I mean, they're hard to look at. They're of so-called contact, right? Of like the white man coming to, convert the heathens and all that shit. I mean, I say that very with a heavy heart, okay? But one of these paintings is a painting of the so-called meeting of Montezuma and Cortez, which never happened. And there's a Mexica sunstone in the background, which speaks to the turning of the ages doctrine in the Mesoamerican tradition. So that helps tune me into the truth, as did the 72 stars that surround the Apotheosis of Washington painting. 72 years are required for 1 degree of precession for this great cycle that now has our north point aligned to this sacred hoop of stars, or aligned to Orion's club, the hand of the high man. And I went to this place with an open heart, like released from the idea that it's just a bunch of Illuminati conspiracy. In many regards, thanks to many independent researchers, including William Henry, who spoke to this place as a stargate, but he doesn't mention the star alignments. But I found them. Actually, I was there one day. I just spent a lot of time under this painting, and then that night, my sister was living there for a while, so I was visiting a lot. But that night I had a dream, and Mercury is like, I think the only time, well, maybe one of three times now, where Mercury came to me in my dream and spoke to me. And he's like, don't you remember, didn't you see what you were seeing? And I was like, oh, right. Like this image, which is an image of Washington above this figure that looks a lot like, what constellation would you say that goddess at the bottom of this painting looks like, man?
Orion.
Orion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the goddess freedom or America. And but she's the only new entrance here, because the rest, like this is Ceres or Demeter. This is Vulcan or Hephaestus. This is Hermes or Mercury here, right above these twin angels, you see?
Yeah.
Mercury and the twins, that sounds familiar. This is Poseidon or Neptune with Venus or Aphrodite. And then this is Pallas Athena here with Ben Franklin. And they're meant to speak of, like, in this case, industry, in this case, agriculture, in this case, well, I could go on and on. But really importantly, there's a lot of images like this that of like a being sitting with the angels on a rainbow that have been painted by sacred painters for a long time of Christ's second coming, right? And here we have Washington in this military regalia, like surrounded by angels, one holding the acacia, and you see the like the trumpet and the sword. This you just if you look at images of like Revelation and the second coming again and again, you'll see like correspondence to this Apotheosis of Washington painting. So for somehow they kind of seem to be speaking to the second coming of Christ. And I had been tuned into that before I went to this place. But what I realized was that it's a stargate. And what I'm showing on the screen right now is just this passage from Mark 14:61, where it's Jesus saying, "You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." And that is this image of this June solstice eclipse. So there, but also the eclipse in 1982, which was a partial eclipse, the eclipse in 2001, which is a total eclipse, and the one that was closest to this kind, I use this 50-year window, 1975 to 2025, of like North Point alignment to this sacred place of space, which I'm showing here with the sacred hoop, as the Lakota call this space, and the cloud of heavens, the Milky Way. Okay, this is a galactic cross, where the plane of our galaxy crosses the plane of our solar system, the ecliptic. And in our day and age, the north and south point are aligned to the galactic crosses in the sky. It won't happen again like this for 26,000 years. And so when I tuned into the truth that there were 72 stars, I realized that this was a processional map, and it was speaking absolutely of this alignment, because the map that it is the map of the sacred hoop of stars. Wow. And it's aligned not only geometrically, but mythically in so many ways. Like Mercury is aligned with the twins, Gemini, who map those twin angels below. Procyon is the little dog, and it maps to Poseidon. But Poseidon was the little dog in the competition with Athena for who would be the guardian of the new city, Athens. Athena won the competition, so she's the big dog, Sirius, which is at one side of the Milky Way. That's this rainbow that runs underneath Washington in the painting, and over to Aldebaran, which is represented by Ceres. There's 7 figures here, and the 7 sisters of the Pleiades sit on the bull's back, and the bull and Taurus, long associated with agriculture, which is what this bit's about. And then Hephaestus or Vulcan is like the builder, like this is the chariot. And then down here, Freedom, of course, representing Orion. She's aligned to Orion's footstool, regal, but it's symbolically set up in such a way that George Washington is the sun sitting on the hand of the high man. Now, interestingly, I then went and looked at some of the, charts for happenings in the United States, like the Declaration of Independence. And it's a fascinating chart in many regards, but when I looked at it in the sky, we find Mars, god of war, and they were declaring war, right at the hand of the high man in the sacred hoop. The Constitution was signed some years later when Jupiter was right there on the hand of the high man. And then the next Jupiter cycle that brought Jupiter back there brought also George Washington's super mysterious death. I don't know what we want to talk about right now, but I want to talk about his rebirth and what he's like a symbol for, which is the rebirthing of each of us, of the Christ. And that it's said that, you know, like Moses was an avatar of the age of Aries, that Christ has been an avatar of the age of Pisces, and that the coming age, the avatar, is each of us, that you are the one you've been waiting for. As I've been saying, this is an old prophecy spoken in many tongues, including the tongue of Frozen 2, which we've watched a good amount of around here. It's this amazing song, which is "You are the one you've been waiting for all of your life." So the last thing I'll show is this other timing, which is 2025, and it's a Jupiter thing. The United States Jupiter synodic returns, which happen every 83 years. One was in 1961, or actually 1859, which was John Brown's body, which basically led to the Civil War. 1942, of course, the United States involved in World War II, which basically put this country on the map. And then the third Jupiter synodic return will be July 4th, 2025. That's a date that some folks have looked to for the ending of the Kali Yuga. I mean, there's even way more debate about when and how that thing happens than this whole dawning of the age of Aquarius. But the principal presentation of this work, I mean, to circle back to why is astronomy important, like, we would never know this if we weren't watching the sky. And thanks so much, like you mentioned this Orion Award that I won from OPA before, like, you know, Daniel Gemario, who was my first teacher, he's one of the first modern astrologers that was like, look, I mean, this translation of the ancient text, like, yes, but let's go to the most ancient, which is simply having a living connection with the sky. And he's brought so many people outside and brought so much forth to astrology, and that passion is something I share with him. And he was the first astrologer to notice, wait a second, this whole processional thing is going to bring the South Point, which he doesn't call it that, but the zero Capricorn point, to like the Golden Gate, which is said of the galactic center's galactic cross. And it's said in some of the traditions that that's where our souls will go. And Daniel taught me about this Lakota calling of this place on the other side as the sacred hoop. And there's a wonderful book called Lakota Star Knowledge by Ronald Goodman, if people want to pursue that. But they speak of that side being where our souls come from, and also the Inipi, the sweat lodge in the sky, where we will go to be purified before we walk the spirit road, which is the Milky Way, to some place that sets in the southwest, and that's Galactic Center. So the place that I've connected, or the piece that I've brought into this, and there's another book I should suggest, which is Galactic Alignment by the great John Major Jenkins, that will talk all about Maya cosmology and Vedic and Egyptian, but really tuned into the other side of the sky. The December solstice sun now is near Galactic Center on the Galactic Cross. What I've brought in is looking to the other side of the sky, and much of that was like initiated into me through this painting in D.C. and the ways that they have aligned to this Orion constellation, like the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Teotihuacan pyramids in Mexico, the pyramids that nobody knows about in China, like all over the place. There has been this, I mean, I hesitate to use this word because of its connotations, but there has been this like Orion cult. And I am convinced the reason why is it's literally the place that our sun was born. And there are these alignments of Earth and Sun, which is the tropical zodiac, to Orion now that won't repeat for 26,000 years. I mean, there's like significant gateways every 6,500 years, but this is one of them. So yeah, Amanda, I mean, in the end here, I got into flow, someplace we didn't think we'd go, so my apologies for that. But as it began, it was like, let's just talk about in a different way, because these are very different images than what I showed last time we talked about why the coming June solstice, hand of the high man eclipse is like the most powerful gateways of our lifetimes. I could say 2001 was maybe stronger, but that one's behind us, friends. Like this is one where we get to choose now. We are in a powerful gateway of at least 50 years that gives us the opportunity to choose to be avatars of the new age. But how can we choose to walk in that sacred way? I mean, that personally, for me right now, that's the thing I think I'm most struggling with, is looking at how I was doing it some years ago and kind of where I'm at now, that I'm so, feeling too busy to wake up and drum and the things that I used to do.
Wow. Do you guys understand why when I got into astrology whenever I started Astrology Hub and started interviewing astrologers about 5 years ago, I would walk away from conversations like the one today going, oh my God. First of all, these people are so incredibly intelligent. Second of all, they are so incredibly passionate, and they are holding keys that help us like put the mysteries of this universe together. And how come nobody knows about it? I felt like I was finding the best kept secret in the world. And your talk right now is reminding me of that feeling that I would have over and over. And I'm just so grateful that you're here sharing these things. And someone asked earlier, is this a documentary? I think the answer is, I think there have been documentaries, but the answer is not from your perspective, and yet it should be at some point. And I know you've done a lot of talks on it, and your presentations are amazing with all the graphics. But can I just boil it down? Can I do my best to like summarize why this?
Sure.
This is the hardest thing ever, but I'm going to just say there's significance for the Orion constellation and where it points in the sky, especially the hand and where the hand is like directed towards, and the June solstice, the high hand, the right hand of the high man,
or the
the
right
hand of the high
right
man, right hand, okay, is going to be pointed directly at that solstice point.
Yes, well played, right. Here's the other bit, is there are eclipses at that point in 1982, 2001, and 2020. And so they're like, because the hand of the high man, like June solstice, is happening basically 1975 to 2025. Like, and it was most powerful in 1999, 2000 in that galactic alignment. But then there's these acupuncture, these pressure points, these like acceleration points with the eclipses in 82, I'll say especially 2001, and then 2020. But for me, and I can look, I hate to like let the Gemini moon reflect the Scorpio sun as it did at the time of my birth, but like, for example, okay, personal computers, 1982, right, Patriot Act 2001, possible mandatory apps that will track us to protect us from the so-called virus coming our way, right, and now. Vaccine laws signed in 1982 protecting the vaccine companies, 2001, like a whole another development in that regard, and Bill Gates' dream of vaccinating the world right now in 2020 to save us, yeah? So couple, I hate to show the cards of my personal bias in strong emphatic statements like that, but what we do as astrologers, we're students of time and cycles, and very fascinatingly, and this is not a thing that's necessarily going to happen, the Saturn-Pluto cycle, like we connected for ceremony shortly after the forecast for the year of Astrology Hub during the day of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Those happen every like 32 to 38 years. It's not that precise because Pluto's orbit is so eccentric, right? It just so happens we're on the long side of that cycle right now. And so what has resulted is that the eclipses that I'm speaking about, they're synchronizing with the Saturn-Pluto cycle. Such that in like the 82 eclipse was right around the last Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Libra. They were opposite during the 9/11 attacks in this 2001 eclipse time. And now, of course, conjoined again in 2020. So most astrologers have been tuning in, for years and literally for decades to this Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, like triple alignment in Capricorn. And there's very few of us who've been like, yes, yes, yes. And, you know, those things, wow, they only happen every 38 years. Well, they only happen every 400 years. Like, wow, this is a thing, like a beat in this long rhythm of 26,000 years that we're into right now. And, you know, it's tricky because for me to like even speak with astrologers about this, I have to teach all this like astronomy.
Right.
Um,
It's not a
but
simple answer.
so, and that comes actually to maybe the most secretive reason why I'm so passionate of teaching astronomy and sacred astronomy to astrologers is I want to have people I can talk to because like only the astrologers are geared in such a way that they have like a heart open towards the sacred nature of the sky, and there's so much happening there. So like, and it's weird to me that I've been initiated this like in DC with like full dying pigeons and falcon beaks and all sorts of other things that my general conspiracy theory approach to life has like asked me to avoid at all costs. And you know, I think that it can go both ways. I really want to be careful like not to offend seekers that have chosen the like secret society paths because I honor that as a thing. It has not been my way in this lifetime for me. I've danced with it a bunch, honestly speaking. And I really like I think I've told some jokes in the past and maybe even some today which could be offensive to those, and I really mean to offend nobody, you know, so I should harness that stuff really. But anyway, it was shocking to me that it was DC where I started seeing these things. I was like, oh wow, the way they're working with Sirius and Aldebaran, like there's this whole other thing in astrology that we don't know about. And it was like, yeah, we know about it. It's called contraparallels. You just never learned that, dude. So there's, and it's cool. Like I'll go to Heiaus in Hawaii and, you know, sit in that throne stone and see that it's aligned right to the North Point. And I can tell, like I'll go in Hawaii and I'll look at charts and I'll look at where my shadow's facing, and it will help me understand the alignments in like my local space. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like I just, when I get aligned to the directions of that site, suddenly the teachings reveal themselves. And this is something I've done in Egypt and Greece and, you know, all around the world. These builders have been honoring the marriage of heaven and earth in such a way and transmitting like the union, like the sacred consummation, I guess, of that union. And the child, let me say that, like the child that is born from the union of the heaven and the sky, which really is each of us when we true to align ourselves once again. And this is one of the great windows of opportunity, like the years in which we are living. We have incarnated in some crazy ass times, we know that, but it is such a powerful gateway for us to step into the potential of what it is to be a human being again. And there are temples around the world, some of them built with great intentionality. And some of them, I think, not at all, but spirit just guides the architect's hands. So, I mean, I have seen fountains in, pardon me, but fucking shopping malls that have like tuned me into astronomical truths that I have never found in a book. And this is a time, and this is why I'm actually so excited for Astrology Hub. Like I'm guiding next month. I did choose this month because I got to choose, which was, that's maybe one of the treats of being in a partnership with the program director. I don't know. But, you know, I said, I want that eclipse thing, you know, and maybe I should teach eclipse cycles, but I don't think so. And then I was so happy to hear that Jennifer Rassiopi will be teaching eclipse cycles as a guide for Astrology Hub's Inner Circle in December, because she's just such a great astrologer. And that is such a great and amazing topic about which I am so passionate. But I had heard that you guys were interested in having astrolocality and astrocartography and maps. Like I really like local space techniques because those techniques I use personally for temple building and to like learn from temples. So I was like, yes, sign me up. That's such a passion of mine. In consultation, like I love directing people to these powerful places. I love hearing their stories of this place was like this and that place. And so for years, I would just have a astro map up next to their chart but I wouldn't talk about it. I wasn't practicing in there. I was just learning. And it was like, oh my gosh, every time. It's like, oh my, what? How is this real? And then I was recently, as you know, Amanda, like on the fence with, should I be teaching maps, because like here we are in the shelter in place mandate, and you know not many of us are interested in stepping onto planes right now. So it kind of seems like a mean thing to do, to show, hey, you need to be in Tahiti. It's like, but I can't, right? But we can travel without moving, and this is one of the glorious gifts of this double-edged sword called modern technology. Like, I actually was doing a demonstration of this just yesterday on my Facebook page, and I kind of like randomly was pointed to Hawaii and to Hina, and so because it was a moon line pointing to Hawaii, and those who know about the Hawaii, you know, realm, like Hina is moon, and so I was like, oh, I need to like go and experience Hina in Hawaii, so I could go to Maui and go see Haleakala Hina, like this whole mountain, but I can't go there right now. So why don't I look at some images? Or what I decided to do was to pull up YouTube, and I just typed in like Hina Oli, right, to receive like a chant for Hina. And there was a kumu called Hina that I was not familiar with, and they sang a chant to Hina on Mauna Kea. And the cool thing is, I was thinking Maui, but the map that I brought up had a line pointing to Big Island, to Mauna Kea. And so I was like, right. And as I said earlier, like I got up the other day and I was looking at Jupiter, and I just heard this like commandment to like direct myself towards that light. And I was facing, and now I know where I can face in every moment, Easter Island. And so then I spent some time like listening to some Easter Island esoteric teachings, you know. So I think it's actually maybe even more so, because, you know, I mean, I can tell you to go to Tahiti when we are free to travel, and it might be more annoying because we can't afford to by time or whatever, you know. So part of the theme for the month ahead that I'm guiding now is going to be traveling without moving. And also, I'm going to do a lot of kind of bonus teachings about temple building, about like how to just where you live build a very simple sundial and medicine wheel, and learn to connect to the energies of the directions. And then there's a really wonderful system in astrology that was dreamed forth by Michael Erlewine called local space, where if we know where the directions, where the planets were in the directions when we were born, we can like create our office spaces in such a way that like honors our birth chart geometry. Like if there's a planet that's receiving a transit that we're struggling with, like we can honor that planet in this specific direction, you know what I mean, and like bring offerings to that place. And it's a really powerful way. So the last thing I'll say on this gigantic flow, which I really was trying to avoid today but it seemed impossible, is that one of my principal themes was like reconnecting to soul family, and I was really excited to challenge seekers who are in Astrology Hub's inner circle with like coming out, announcing that you do like following the stars and in person meeting up with people. And of course, like we can't do that right now, but we also can online. We can plant the seeds for that to sprout, as Astrology Hub has been for years. And I'm really interested in this question that I often ask the fourth house, and often ask Cancer, and often ask the direction north, which is, what is shelter? And what is safety? And what is trust? And so I'm really encouraged that the thing that I had decided on a while ago is going to look totally different than it would have when I thought about it. And it's perfect, as it always is, because when the raven flies around, the first thing we should do is giggle and then ask why instead of tell it why it flies, you know?
Oh my gosh. Brett, I'm so excited, as I know all of our inner circle members are right now, about your upcoming um, lunar cycle that you'll be guiding, and this emphasis on being able to build temples in our backyards or in our office or whatever to help us align with that energy. Because as you were speaking about when you come to Hawaii and sit in the heiau and you sit in the throne, which they create out of rocks, and you're able to more clearly receive transmissions and teachings. And you talk about how this time is a time where we're becoming more human. And part of that is tapping into the inherent technology of our own bodies and our own ability to attune to intelligence, divine intelligence. And that's exactly what you're describing. And utilizing what we love here at Astrology Hub, utilizing the sky and all the things we know about the sky and the alignments to do that sounds so magical and so amazing. So thank you for bringing this. And you're just, I can see why you got that OPA award, and it is very well deserved. And you're really just bringing in this element into astrology that's so necessary. And I can feel it in myself. And I don't know if all of you can relate, but you pull us into new directions that are hard sometimes for the mind. I mean, it's very like you want to grasp on with the mind because you're telling so many amazing facts and figures and things, and yet what I'm sensing is that it is something truly that comes back to us experiencing it, feeling it, and having our own direct experiences of these things. So if you admire anything that you're seeing in Brett, I think what he's showing us is that by having this sacred relationship with the sky, these things can too be yours. If, just taking the time and entering into that sacred, reverent communion with the universe itself. So, okay, few things. There's so many other directions. I had a million questions as you were going, but it's perfect. The flow is perfect. If you all want to join us for the Solstice panel event that we're hosting for this very auspicious moment, please go to astrologyhub.com/solstice. Brett is going to be one of 7 panelists that we're going to have featured talking about the importance of this solstice invitation, along with the rest of the year, what to look for as we start in the latter half of 2020. So that's happening. It's free, astrologyhub.com/solstice. This is also the day in which we will be opening up our inner circle membership. So for those of you who are like, I wanted to join, I didn't join, I'd love to join now. That is going to be the beginning of an enrollment period that's going to last about 2 weeks. The other thing is, another thing that's going to be very free for everybody is on the actual solstice. So June 20th. So the solstice panel is on June 17th, we think, which I think is correct. Go check it out.
My calendar says 11 a.m. Pacific on the 17th.
Perfect. Okay. And of course, it will be recorded, but sign up so we know to send you the recording. Okay. The panel's on the 17th. We are going to be doing another sacred ceremony on June 20th on the actual solstice. Brett, Tammy, and myself. So Tammy Brunk is another inner circle guide this year. Her month is coming up soon. Me and Brett will be doing or leading, hosting, guiding ceremony that you are all invited to participate in. Normally our ceremonies are just for the inner circle members, but this one we're opening up to everyone, and we would love to have you join that as well. You'll get details about that when you sign up for the solstice panel. So don't worry, there's nothing to sign up for that. That's going to be available for all of you. So if you go to astrologyhub.com/solstice, you'll start to get the details for both of those events, which I'm very, very, very excited about. April is asking, is this a portal or a gateway to the new earth? I think with everything that Brett is saying, I would answer for you very much yes. And the only caveat is that it's requiring our active participation. This is not a portal that we just get to oh my gosh, amazing. Like, let's receive some transmissions and be changed. What I'm experiencing this year, and Brett, I think that you would agree, is that um, this, the changes that are happening require our active contribution, participation, our active work. And
Yeah, I just came in. I'll say it this way: it is the new Earth and the new Earthling, and it's not the new Earth that will make the new Earthling. It's the new Earthling that will make the new Earth. And so we are required to step in and to dream into what this wants to be. And that's so this is one of the great ideas of this like alignment, like just learning to get aligned with Gaia's spine, just knowing north and south. And it's not what the compass says. Amanda, there's two quick things that came in while you were just sharing. Can I show them?
totally.
Okay, so I will be teaching like astro maps, and I mean it's going to be a short master class of like astrocartography and local space. I would love to teach. There's like 5 different things that I use, but this is the solstice eclipse that's coming up. I have it cast for Richmond, California, but an astrocartography map, it doesn't care. It's just a map of the moment where planets are rising or reaching or resting or rooting, as I like to call the ascendant, midheaven, IC, descendant, and IC. So I can see in this map that the eclipse itself, which is this moon-sun line, will be at the midheaven, and therefore it will be midday during the eclipse, like on this line that moves down here through India. But I need to go to the astronomers' resources, not that that map isn't an astronomical resource, to find out like the path of this coming June solstice eclipse. And I'm seeing that, and I have seen that it's moving through Africa, and then the highest part of the eclipse, like the center of these eclipses, they say is like right in this kind of India Nepal zone. And so when we speak about like having ceremony on that day, like there's a lot of ways that I want to come to that. But I'm also just, and I'll check in with you offline about this, Amanda. Like maybe we could bring somebody that has their feet anchored in that tradition. That's like kind of that tradition that's really being focused in on this. I like to call those lines like how the planets are seeing us. You know, like Earth is looking at a specific place on Earth, or Sun is looking at a specific place on Earth in every moment. And the eclipse will be the moon and the sun looking at the same place, you know, so it'd be really, I think, powerful to bring in some of that like earthly location into the ceremony. So let's
I like that idea.
This is the way I love to use maps. It's just to say like, hey, look, there's a whole tradition in that place. Learn to speak the language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I want to like break this whole thing into bite-sized things so that people don't miss the gold that's just laid out there. It's amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been such a pleasure. I love, love, love doing these with you. This summer, I mean, I keep doing it. I have to break up those terms in my head. I was going to say summer solstice.
It is summer for you though, so we should think globally and act locally.
All right. Well, okay. I'd like to be inclusive. The solstice series that is happening. So this is the first. I'm going to be talking to all the different astrologers who will be a part of that panel that is taking place on June 17th. So when you see solstice series pop up on your Facebook when we're live, or you see it in YouTube or on the podcast titles, you'll know that these are the series of talks that we'll be doing leading up to the solstice, which is going to be another incredible event that we get to share together. So thank you so much. Again, astrologyhub.com/solstice if you want to participate in that panel event and the ceremony. And once again, Brett, thank you. It is always such a pleasure. You need to come to Maui as soon as you can. And I want to go to those heiaus with you. That would be so much fun. So please.
I would love to.
Yes.
Yeah, hey, stay on for a second after we end. I'm going to tell you about a couple places you probably already know. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a treat to speak with you. I was really like dreaming of more of a conversational thing than just some channeling. But sorry, you know, that's how it went. I shouldn't apologize. I think that was fun. But I do look forward to you know, hearing more of of you when we connect, because it's I always learn. Will reflect, I guess, after we end on a very important thing that I learned from you today.
Okay.
So it is a treat always to have the opportunity to engage with the Astrology Hub community, and it's just such an honor to have the opportunity to be a guide for the inner circle. Once again, it's like always my favorite month, connecting with people who have really beautiful questions and open hearts and are really doing this thing for a reason that feels a lot like the ones that I am. So thank you for having me back, and thanks for having me here, and thanks everybody for tuning in. It's nice to have your ear for a moment.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow for the Cosmic Connection with Rick Levine. So looking forward to it, everybody. Take care.